Hi, I'm Deboki, and this is Okie Dokie Boki, and I am here to film a vlog. I actually just finished filming a library check-in. Those were the books I talked about. I should have already posted it, so if you want to see it, you can watch that. But basically, now is my accountability period. That is the goal of this blog. The theme of it is that I'm going to actually read some of these books. I'm also next week going to VidCon for the first time ever, mostly just because of work. It's, been, I don't know, like a lot of people, I have been home a whole bunch for the past 2 years. And even before the pandemic, I was working from home. I am a freelance science writer, so I kind of just have been working remotely for a while. And so conferences have been really important to me in the past as a way to meet people. I'm going to be traveling a bit. And so, yeah, I want to get some books read before I leave and then figure out what books I'm going to bring with me when I go to California. And we'll hopefully read on the plane there and maybe also on the plane ride back. Okay, so today is Sunday. So I've had kind of a weird, lazy day in terms of I got up and I worked out, and after I hung out with my parents on Zoom, and then immediately after I passed out and took a very long nap because I guess I earned it or something. But anyways, my goal for today, now that it is almost 4 p.m., is to get my packing started, do some house stuff, like some laundry, some trash. My cat is staring at me because he's decided that it's food time. It's the only reason he ever stares at me. So yeah, I'm going to do that. And my other goal for today is to finish reading Not All Diamonds and Rosé because I just want to get it done. I'm not loving it. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine for what it is. It's an oral history of the Real Housewives that basically just feels like Bravo realized hey, if we do what we usually do, but in book form, we can sell even more of what we do. I'm pretty sure this is authorized by Bravo. There's a whole drama where Brian Moylan wrote his Real Housewives book, which the title I'm blanking on completely right now. But as he was working on it, Bravo got kind of mad at him for working on it. But then at the same time, I think this book might have started having work done on it, and it clearly has a lot more access. There's Andy Cohen interviews, producer interviews, and everyone is named, whereas the Brian Moylan book, some of the people in it are who are being interviewed or not being named. And then also the Brian Moylan book goes way more into actual details of how the Real Housewives is made. One of the chapters that was published ahead of time on Vulture was about how trips get paid for. So it's a lot more about that behind the scenes stuff that I find way more interesting, rather than the behind the scenes drama that is always the subtext of what's going on in the show, but they can't talk about because it's on the show, which I think is part of my frustration with this book, because it mostly exists because the show itself has to be really limited in this one particular way, where we always know, at this point, if you've been watching Real Housewives for a while, you know that any argument that is on the show that's being had is at this point really about the show itself. And so it feels like this book exists for them to finally reveal, ta-da, yes, this thing is actually what it's all about. But we know that. I don't know. It's fine. It's fine. And I feel obligated to read this book because it's still fun. But it's just, I think the thing about it too is it's also structured in such a boring, obvious way. It's done by each chapter is focused on a particular franchise. So there's really nothing interesting about the book beyond the fact that it exists. There's nothing done in terms of any kind of thematic comparisons. I think it would be super cool to compare certain things that keep popping up in each franchise that we see happening, OGs on particular seasons who get to a point where they decide that they're too big for the show. That's something that we see happen again and again and again. And at this point, now that I am on the 4th chapter, I think, which is New Jersey, it feels almost I'm basically reading the other chapters again, but just set now to the antics that I know happened already in New Jersey. So it feels even less revealing with each chapter that I get, which is just kind of meh, but whatever. I still am compelled to finish this book. So I want to finish that today, but right now my focus is on the house stuff. So laundry, like I said, taking out the trash, the really exciting stuff. But the reason why I'm mentioning it here is because the one thing I am going to be doing is finally finishing the audiobook of The Long Game. I'm at the point where at 1.5x speed, I have about an hour and a half left. And I have been like putting off finishing it because not because I like don't want to finish it, because I've already read the book. Like I've read the ebook, loved it, and like now I'm just like revisiting it on audiobook just because I wanted to. Like I had read the ebook so quickly that like I knew that I was going to kind of go back to the audiobook after just to kind of savor it a little bit. I mean at 1.5x speed, but that's still like savoring it compared to like reading the book itself like within a single day, you know, just like flipping through every page just to know what happens. But the problem, which I knew was going to happen, is I was always going to get to this one particular moment in the book that I both didn't super love as a plot choice, but also just like stresses me out, and I didn't like, I don't know, it's just it's a moment in the book that is like pretty intense and kind of tough for the characters, and I have been just, I don't know, it's kind of like, you know, when you watch a horror movie and if you're scared like me and you don't want to see them do the thing, you like run out before the actual scary thing happens, which is, you know, kind of defeats the point of the horror movie, but whatever. Anyways, so I've been like literally right now, I am like within seconds of this terrible thing happening in the audiobook, and I keep just postponing it because I just know that once I get to that point, I need to finish the entire book at once. Like I just need to get through all of the rest of it at once. Like I can't just listen, you know, at like 10, 20-minute chunks at a time. So I figured, okay, today I've got a lot of shit to do. Why don't I just use this? Okay, so today is Monday. Yesterday, I did finish listening to the Long Game audiobook. I powered through, and even the stuff that I was like not looking forward to, I feel like actually just like listening to it on audiobook was a real like moment of like, right, it only takes a few minutes to get through those scenes, especially if you put it on 2x speed. Sorry, that's a calendar notification. Yeah, there's like I had this real moment of like, oh, okay, if you just listen to it, it only takes like a few minutes to get through those scenes, and then you're fine. Like the scenes are not gonna hurt you. These sad moments are not gonna hurt you. So yeah, I got through it, finished it, and had that feeling again of like the book hangover, which I haven't had in such a long time. Like it's just been a while. I think there are only a handful of books where like I finish them and I just really feel that like that, I don't know, that heaviness of just like, oh, I love this book. I feel like the other one that I have it with is whenever I reread Kushil's Dart, which I haven't reread in a while. But yeah, when I finish that book, I usually have this moment of like, especially if I finish the whole trilogy, where like I read all three and get to the end and I just like feel that contentment, but also like that kind of restlessness of like, there's no more. Like I mean, technically there are more books in that series, but let's be real, the other trilogies are not as good. Just always nice to relive that feeling, and like to see like even when you are rereading the book, and like I read The Long Game for the first time like only a few weeks ago. No, like a few months, because it came out in April. But yeah, not that long ago, and just was reading it on audiobook this time and just really enjoying it, and just, yeah, I'm glad. So now I have moved on to rereading Any Old Diamonds, which is my other romance comfort read alongside Heated Rivalry, and so I'm enjoying that. So I'm gonna keep doing that for the next few days probably. I am also finally on the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills chapter of this book. I mean, I don't know how many times I can say this, but this book is fine. It's okay. I just am consistently baffled by the fact that I feel so compelled to read it when I'm also so annoyed by it. Like, I feel like this book had the potential to be something a lot more interesting than what it is, because like it is cool to potentially have like an oral history of Real Housewives, but just not done like this. Like, I just feel like there must be so much interesting content in this book that would stand out so much more if it were structured in a very different way. I also had this realization that whenever there's like, we're starting out with a new franchise in this book, because it's divided by a franchise each chapter, the beginning of the chapters are a lot more interesting because those are focused on the early days of the series, and the early days of any reality TV show, I think, are always the most interesting because they are the most chaotic. It's where the cast knows the least about what they're doing. There's the most uncertainty. So just like, as far as there just being a whole mess of stuff to sort through, there's just a lot more. And also, like, because the beginning of the series is longer ago, like there's been more time since the beginning of the series, there's a lot more chance for reflection. You know, there's more people who were on that season, like the first seasons, who are no longer on it, so they've had more of a sense of being able to look back and see the way that doing the Real Housewives was a weird part of their experience, their life experience or whatever. Like there's just more perspective. And so then as you move on through the chapters, they get more and more uninteresting because there's just not as much to do with these seasons that have taken place more recently, and it's just kind of like we're rehashing stuff that we've like literally just seen on TV. So yeah, that's kind of my feeling with this book, and I feel like I'm going to say that every time I check in here. And I mean, I'm excited for the Potomac chapter just because the Potomac housewives are great, so I feel like their quotes are going to be hysterical. But otherwise, like, we're getting more and more like to the franchises that have started more recently. And so, you know, those are the franchises that have started with people who have already been watching a lot of Real Housewives, where you see them starting to play roles from the beginning. And that's part of why a lot of the new Real Housewives franchises to me are too much. Like Salt Lake City, too much. I don't actually think Salt Lake City is good. I think people think it's good because like it's a little bit chaotic. Not a little bit, it's a lot chaotic, but I actually don't think it's good right now. I might change my mind, but right now I just don't like it because everyone is just clearly playing a role but not playing it well. So anyways. So that's my feeling now. But my goal is to finish this book today, just because I want to be done with it. I need to return it to the library before I leave. So I want to finish it. So basically today, I've got to do a bunch of work. I got to do some research for Dear Hank and John. Basically, I go through all the science questions that they get and I look up stuff. Just basically, I'm like, this is a potential answer, so that Hank has a little bit to go on before he records the podcast. I also look up like what's going on in Mars. So that's my mornings. Those are usually my Monday mornings. So that's very typical. Usually my Monday afternoons are working on SciShow Tangents, but I don't know if we have that this week. Instead, I'm going to be working on Microcosmos, on Journey to the Microcosmos. So I have 2 scripts due Wednesday that I've started working on. Today is the day that I get more done on them. So basically, my goal for today, I do on days like this, or really a lot, like recently what I've been doing to try to get like both my work done, but also to get some reading done, is I use Pomodoro a lot. I mean, I've been using Pomodoro off and on for a long time, where you do 25 minutes on of work, 5 minutes off, and then a 25-minute break. Yeah, 25-minute break after 4 cycles of those 25 minutes of work. And so I usually find that really helpful just because it helps me just like break my work down into much more manageable chunks instead of getting overwhelmed overall with everything I have to do. And the other thing I've started doing is using my 5-minute break periods to read, and also using my 25-minute break periods to read. Basically any of the break periods I use to read. And that's been helping me just like squeeze a little bit more reading into my day and just do that. So that's my plan for today. Okay, I am super sweaty and gross because I just went for a run. I am in Anaheim. I am at VidCon. Well, I guess I'm at the hotel, or at a hotel near VidCon. But yeah, I got in yesterday. It's been a whole thing. Flying has been awful. My first flight out of like when I was leaving home, we got grounded. They wouldn't let us fly for like hours because of some weather thing. So we ended up being super delayed. I missed my connection. So luckily I got like rebooked to a flight early the next day, and I had to just like find a hotel, stay in Dallas overnight, but luckily I could fly out early enough the next day so that I wouldn't be arriving super late. And then yesterday I was flying in and I was like, finally, like I'm almost there. And then while I was on the plane in my cramped little middle seat, because I'd been rebooked onto this flight, I spilled apple juice all over myself, like onto my pants. So it fully looked like I had peed my pants. So luckily I had like my backpack like right at my feet so I could easily like get some clothes to change into on the plane. But it was just like one of those things where you're like, with how this trip has been going, like somehow spilling like apple juice on myself and like making myself look like I've peed my pants, it's not the worst thing that's happened on this flight or like on this trip, but it does feel like the most inevitable at that point. So whatever, I made it. It's fine. And yesterday I went to my first day ever of VidCon, which was pretty fun. Good to see, I guess. I mean, I don't really have much more to say at this point. And I have also been reading. That's the other thing. That's basically why I'm still filming this vlog, even though it has been multiple days since I actually last filmed. So while I was on the flight, I was reading Trust by Hernan Diaz. I had started reading this a little bit before I started filming this vlog. I think I'd gone like 30 pages in or so, and I had really been intrigued by it. It's very focused on these two characters. They're a couple. They're like this super rich philanthropic couple in the 30s in New York City. So, you know, they're making a shit ton of money while plenty of other people are not. So it's really exploring the dynamics of how they've come to make that money, how they've come to be married, what their relationship has been like. And there's also a lot of underlying things around how women's mental health is treated, pharmaceutical kind of stuff in that era. So one of the things that's been interesting too about the book, it's kind of subdivided into mini books. So there are multiple books within this book. The first book is this tale of that couple, and then the next one is a memoir that plays on the stuff that you've just read in that previous book. And then now I am into another memoir, I guess, that's going to build on those other three. So it's one of those things where as you start to read more of the books within the books, the initial story that you were told about this couple starts to take on different lenses. And I don't know if that's the right way to say that, but you start to see things differently, which is really, really fun, especially given the subject, given that it is about a powerful couple. And I think, you know, anytime you've got a story about powerful people, the frame that you're telling them, telling that story is going to change so much about how they're perceived. Obviously, from one lens, you're going to see their power maybe as something compelling, something really impressive, something to aspire to. From another lens, you might see their power as something really disgusting and something that is inherently oppressive of other people. So that's been something that's really keeping me invested in this book. I'm about halfway through at this point, so I'm hoping to finish this by the end of the trip, probably as I'm flying back, just because I don't know that I'm going to get a whole lot of reading done while I'm here, but that is my goal. I decided to start with the chill stuff. One of the things that I feel is always weird about California and being in California is that you wake up to news that when you're on the East Coast is sort of midday news. And so today I woke up and found out that Roe v. Wade was overturned, which is deeply upsetting. And I don't really have much more about that to say right now. I've talked about this before in my videos about my miscarriages, but you know, my experience with pregnancy has only emphasized to me that abortion is absolutely an essential part of healthcare. It's absolutely an essential part of people's lives, and having control over your body. Sorry, I know I'm holding this book up while I talk about Roe v. Wade, because that has nothing to do with this book yet that I know of. Pregnancy is such a massive, massive thing to put yourself through physically, emotionally, financially, and our country doesn't do enough as it is to support any of that. Especially the maternal mortality rate in the US is pretty abysmal. The support for people after they've given birth in terms of care, in terms of paternity, maternity leave, all those things are just really, really bad. So we're already doing not that well when it comes to supporting people in birth, and we're not empowering people or enabling them to make what should be the best choice necessarily for them. And the other side of that is also abortion. And I'm someone who's had, with both of my miscarriages, I've had to have surgeries to remove the tissue from my body, which was a physically and emotionally intense experience. And those are procedures that are also used for abortion. And I think my primary concern with abortion is how it's going to affect people who want and need abortions for their because they want to terminate a pregnancy. That is first and foremost. I don't want it to be about something else other than that, because I think that is something that people should be allowed to have, and I don't want to change the terms of the conversation. But it also really freaks me out to have like the restrictions put on abortions in a way where like if you're in a situation like I was in where it's really scary, it just like really freaks me out to have those kinds of procedures that are essential for care in so many contexts, have them be so under scrutiny in this one context, because it's just going to make it harder and scarier for everyone. I'm going to take a hard left turn to talk about my hotel breakfast. This was like all free. I saw the Lee's sandwiches wrapper and I was so happy. I would eat Lee's banh mi so much when I was living in Southern California. This is not a banh mi, it's a ham and egg and cheese croissant sandwich, which I'm also really happy about. I'd never had that from Lee's, but I'm just very happy. I'm saying very happy. I literally like 3 minutes ago was like, I'm really upset, and I am really upset, but I'm also happy to have a Lee's sandwich because, I don't know, it's the little things. I've also got some waffles. I don't know why I'm showing this off as if like this is my amazing, incredible breakfast, but whatever. I'm vlogging, I can do what I want. But I'm gonna eat this breakfast, go do some VidCon, and read some more Trust and deal with the bullshit that is living in America right now. So yeah, bye. So I am going to finally close out this vlog today. It has been weeks since I last recorded, but I don't know, that's just something that happens. I've been editing the rest of this vlog just so I could remember like what it is I actually talked about, because I was like, otherwise I don't know, like what was I saying a few weeks ago? So the last time I checked in, I was in California, and basically what happened is I got home from that and then had a few days at home and then flew out to Italy to meet up with my husband because he had been in basically on his own little Europe tour because of various conferences that he was going to. So we decided that at the end of his trip, I would meet up with him in Florence. And so that is why I haven't really been working on this. So, you know, my excuse for why I wasn't vlogging is because I was busy eating pasta and just walking around a really cool city, and I feel pretty okay with that. The highlight for me for sure was visiting the Galileo Museum, which is a history of science museum. I love history of science and I love looking at old science equipment. So spending like the morning and spending a good few hours just like walking around. It's not a huge museum, but I was just very excited to be there and just kind of stare at everything. So yeah, I would definitely, if you're going to Florence and you love science, I would definitely recommend the Galileo Museum. Of course, there are plenty of other museums in Florence too. And so a lot of what people go there for is the art. And that was pretty wild. It was pretty cool to just be like, oh, you just like go to this square and there are these crazy old like sculptures just hanging there, like total masterpieces, just in the middle of the city. It was wild. And then also we ate really good food. One of the things that a lot of people had told us is that Florence has great food. And I think the thing that was cool, it was just like, it felt like you could sit anywhere, like even if you're in a super touristy spot, like the food is still really, really good and not crazy overpriced or anything. So just ate a lot of pasta, ate a lot of gelato. It was great. That's where I've been. Let me just like now finish up with books, because that was the goal of this vlog. I was supposed to, as I've learned from editing my vlog, the goal of this vlog was accountability. And I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good about my reading. I didn't read a massive amount, but you know, I started out the vlog wanting to finish Not All Diamonds and Rosé, which I did. And you know, my thoughts don't really deviate much more from what I had originally said. I realized I didn't actually close it all out, didn't like wrap it all up. I think basically because I was going to just say what I'd already said, which is that this book is fine. I think it's really like, if you're a Bravo fan and you think you want to read it, then read it. I don't think you should come out of it necessarily expecting to be like blown away by anything in it, unless maybe like you haven't been paying attention to like a lot of the secondary gossip around the show. But yeah, I'm glad I read it. It is what it is. Then there was Trust, which I started talking about while I was in California because I'd started reading it on the way there, and I did finish it on the plane ride back. Overall, I think the most interesting thing about Trust is the way that it uses different writing style and the way that it's like really curious about writing style as a way to explore people's perspective. And so as you're shifting from point of view to point of view, the characters themselves that are giving that point of view, like it's all like in written form. Like obviously the book is written, but like I guess, I don't know if like epistolary is the right way to describe it, but like the first the first part of the book is like written as a book within the book. Then you have like a memoir, then a memoir, and then a journal. And so it's like you're not just getting like a narration, you're getting the actual character's writing style as a form of narration. And so that's really, I think, compelling part of the book. It's part of probably the most interesting thing about it. And I think the things that it's also interested in that I talked about as far as like power and the way that it's perceived, those are interesting too. But I feel like, I don't know, I think when I finished the book, that aspect of it, especially how it really plays into what I think becomes the clear point of the book, which is to understand how we perceive women and power, that part for me felt a little bit flatter. It didn't quite hit as hard as I wanted it to. In my library check-in, I talked about this, not exactly this, but something sort of related, which is sort of feeling a little fatigued with books that are about revisiting narratives about villainous women. And this is not strictly that. I think of this as sort of like a book sort of related to that, which is, or this is the type of book that's sort of like in a category that I think is very adjacent to that, which is still sort of this idea around revisiting things related to women, but it's sort of like revisiting a central narrative, revisiting a central female character, and revisiting our perspectives around it once we see things through the lens of that female character. And there are books that do that I really love. Like one of the ones that I always think of is Laura, which is this noir book. There's also a movie based on it. It's written by Vera Kaspari. It's one of my favorite books. I haven't actually read in a while, so I should maybe revisit it sometime soon. But it has this central murder of the character Laura, and basically over the course of the book, we're going from point of view to point of view. It also shifts form and becomes very curious about how people perceive Laura and how that figures into the central murder that starts everything off. And then another probably better known one is Gone Girl. And that one, again, like similar kind of thing. Like you are starting with one perspective, then switching to another. And it's very curious about how do we perceive Amazing Amy. And so those are books that do that in a way that I find really, really interesting. Then there are books like Fates and Furies, which I know a lot of people love, but I think the way that that book sort of plays with perspective and perspectives on a specific central events and how like your view of them changes once you see them through the lens of the female character, it just didn't work as well for me. And so this book feels for me a little bit more in the line of Fates and Furies. And so given the books that I've mentioned, I'm curious if this is because I am someone who just doesn't read as much literary fiction. And so I tend to be much more intrigued by the way that genre fiction tends to do these stories. So like Gone Girl is a thriller, you know, Laura is a noir novel. Like those are specific like crime stories. And so they're doing those things in pursuit of a greater plot goal, I guess, that I find really interesting. And maybe for books like Fates and Furies and Trust, they're doing something that is maybe more subtle or maybe more, I don't know, quiet in a way that I am just not often as intrigued by. I'm not saying that that is what's happening, because it could just be that they're not as good, and I don't want to like do that thing where I'm doubting my own perspective, even though I'm always doubting my own perspective. But that is part of where I'm kind of trying to piece together what my feelings about Trust are overall. I did like it overall, and there is a reveal at the end that I did find genuinely really intriguing. The thing that was hard for me is because of the way that the book is structured and because of the way that reveal happens, there's just not a lot of room to actually grapple with that reveal, and that was sort of disappointing to me. And so maybe that's where what I'm kind of responding to and what has ultimately left me feeling a little mixed about the book overall. But I do recommend it. I think if you've heard about the book, if you've read the summary and you're curious about it, I think it's definitely worth picking up. I think the writing is really wonderful. And again, like I said, it's playing a lot with different writing styles as a way, like a way to show characterization. And I really like that. So that was what I read when I came back from California. Then I read a book on the way back from Florence, and I was very proud of myself. I didn't read anything on the way out, but I did read on the way back. Well, actually, that's not true. I was listening to the audiobook of the Will Darling Adventures by KJ Charles, because this is part of my ongoing saga that I've talked about in earlier parts of this vlog, of listening to romance novels that I love on audiobook. The Will Darling Adventures, I really enjoyed the first time I read it, but I hadn't really reread the whole series. So I was like, why don't I revisit that on audiobook? And so I listened to the first book on my flight out to Florence. And then on the way back, I decided I wanted to actually read one of the books that I brought with me from home. Kind of just felt like I needed needed to justify why I'd packed those books in my suitcase. I'd only brought two. I brought Sense and Sensibility, and I brought True Story by Daniel J. Lindemann, and I decided to read True Story, which is about reality TV. And Lindemann is a sociologist, so basically the goal of this book is to talk about reality TV and sociology. So it was very much up my alley. I was very excited to read it. And the thing that I found really interesting about this book is what it really reminded me of. This is going to reveal so much about how I grew up. I had a lot of these books as a kid that were like those books that use adventure to like teach you math, right? Like the one that is in my head, and I don't know what it was called. I don't remember that much more about it, but I'm pretty sure there was like kids and a bird on a weird planet, and they were going around having to do adventures, and as part of their adventures they had to do math, right? Like that's the premise of the book. So basically, you know, like those educational books that are using fun things to teach you about serious things. That's kind of what True Story reminded me of, where I think the goal of the book, and she kind of says this basically, is to use reality TV to teach you about sociology. It's not necessarily, I think, a hardcore academic sociology reading of reality TV as much as it's a very well thought out way to use reality TV to teach you sociology. And I loved it. I just thought it was really interesting. And, you know, I say this coming off of like having read more sociology related books in the past 2-3 years. How long have we been doing nonfiction book club? You know, that's like been my real introduction to sociology. And so this was great for kind of stepping back and getting even more of an introduction, kind of like going back into like, oh, okay, so these are some of the foundational texts, maybe these are some of the foundational thinkers or the way of thinking, and basically using reality TV to teach me that. One of the things that I talked about with Not All Diamonds and Rosé is being kind of bummed out that they went for the obvious structure of each chapter is structured by, or each chapter is a designated Real Housewife franchise, and kind of I would have preferred or found it a lot more interesting if they had gone thematically, like each chapter was a theme, and that's what this book decided to do, and I think it does it pretty well. So like each chapter is focused on a particular topic, and you know, there are these grand, big social kind of topics, right? Like we've got race, class, gender, children, marriage, like these big topics. And so obviously, you know, the goal is not to be like Real Housewives is gonna like teach us all about all of these topics. The goal instead is to like start off with a given topic and to basically use a few different reality TV shows to see how they kind of reflect our given thoughts as a society, or like the mixture of thoughts that exists around, yes, again, whatever topic. And so I just found it really interesting. And I also found it a very easy read. I read it so fast. I think I read it in like maybe 2 hours, basically, like practically in one sitting. If I didn't have to get off my first flight, it would have been one sitting, you know? So yeah, I really loved it, and I definitely recommend it. I'm hoping to do it for a nonfiction book club. I've already told Nicole basically, like when we come back, we're doing this book. It's so good. And I'm curious to see if she's gonna like it too, because like she has sat through sociology classes and I have not. So I think it'll be interesting to see if we respond the same way, and if not, like it'll still be super fun. But yeah, I really loved it. So if you are looking for a good, like kind of more thoughtful take on reality TV, I think that's definitely a good book to turn to, and I would recommend it. So yeah, you know, I started out this vlog just wanting to make sure that I read some of my library books, and the last few weeks I've read 3 of them, and so I'm pretty happy with that, you know? And now I'm reading Sense and Sensibility, which I am enjoying. It's time that I finally read it, and we'll see where my reading goes next. So thank you guys for watching this vlog that I every so often remembered to film, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.